Welcome to Leadership and Life Chat with your hosts, me, Becky Ames.
And me, Mark Curtis. In each episode, we'll be illustrating how success in leadership is inextricably linked with success in life.
Whether it's leadership in business, society, family or friends, we're all leaders.
Using our experiences and a range of expert guests, we'll share secrets to boosting your health, wealth and self.
So let's get on with the show.
Welcome to part 2 of the 15 surprising things ultra-productive people do differently. Becky, if you remember, in the previous deep dive episode, we talked about Kevin Kruse and his book and the 15 things that ultra-successful people do differently. And we left 3 top tips with the audience. We covered 3 things, and we promised that in the next episode, we were going to knock off 3 more things which we thought would be highly valuable to the listeners of the podcast.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that chat last week, Mark, and I would thoroughly recommend to anyone who missed that to go back and listen to it so they can catch up. And then today will follow on really nicely.
Yeah, so Becky, great. And we shared some insights from our own world of business as well, maybe things that could help people maybe relate to some of the points as well. So in the same vein, maybe today we pick another 3 of the top 15, and perhaps we can put our personal twist in things that we see in business happening as well, which may add value and just help make it more relatable to the listeners. So if that's okay with you, over to you for the first one today, Becky.
Thanks. So my next one was, it's tip number 7 actually, which is check emails 3 times a day. And this applies to social media as well, I think. We all are so distracted by things pinging and notifications, etc. But particularly emails, they say check it only 3 times a day, because otherwise you're interrupting your flow. And if you schedule time to actually check them, then that's far better, because it's like we were talking about in the last episode about if you put things in your calendar, you will get them done, but equally you're focusing much better on each thing rather than being pulled in every direction. And as Kevin says there, that you do maintain your flow, which can be really difficult, can't it, if you've got things pinging up all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a massive one with the team I'm in, and we actually did this probably 3 or 4 years ago now. We kind of said to the team, let's trial turning off the notifications. So the first step in the road to perhaps checking our emails a bit less was to turn off the notifications, because you know, it's like when it pings up on your screen, it's as good as checking your emails anyway, because you're like, ooh, what's that? I better have a look at that. You know, look, someone's emailed me. Oh, wow, I'm so popular. I better go and have a look at that. So we're distracted anyway. And because we're already distracted, we just go and check it, don't we? So we actually trialed it as a team. We just switched off the notifications, and it did help, because it was one less kind of, you know, it doesn't take much to distract us as human beings, does it? You know, shiny bottle lids, anything, we get quite easily distracted. And by doing that, it was just one less distraction to draw us to our email. So that made a big difference. But I can hear some people now shouting at their iPhones or whatever while they're listening to, saying, yeah, but I get loads of urgent emails. I've got to check them, because if I don't, you know, my business is going to go to hell in a handcart type thing. So Becky, if someone said to you, but I get loads of important emails, what would you say to them?
I think we do put that pressure on ourselves, don't we? And if someone wants you really urgently, they will pick up the phone. They will probably try other ways of getting hold of you anyway. And I think it's just far more important to deal with emails in a structured, focused way and not let them take over your day. I've turned my notifications off, and the big one for me is not to have that number showing on, or the envelope showing. Can't even remember what it is now, but it's just, you know, it's one thing when it pings up on your screen and you can read the opening lines, but actually even just having something indicating there's mail sitting there is distracting. So for me, turning that off has been great, because for all I know, there's 100 or none, but equally anything that's super urgent, someone will shout in a different way, is my experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Emails, probably in 2023 as we sit here, email should not be your primary urgent contact medium.
No.
Because more and more people are not checking their emails. I mean, one of my colleagues was telling me that what they've now done is they've actually they've set it up so if they're BC'd into something, if they're blind copied into something, then they don't get a notification for that, because they work on the basis that if someone really wants to email them, they will be in the main kind of sender box, the to box, not the BC box.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who do that. So either the CC or the BC, they have that automatic file into a folder, don't they?
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah.
doesn't even show in their inbox. And it's just a way of managing it. I guess what matters then is that people appreciate that if they CC rather than put in the to box, that as far as I'm concerned, that's something that I might need to know, but I don't need to respond or act on. But
Yeah.
then we all need to kind of be in the know on that, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just, again, it's communication, isn't it? So it's letting
Yeah.
people know, isn't it? And, you know, and one of the things, again, we've tried in my team is people have actually put notifications on to say, I'm only checking my emails at, 9, 12 and 3. So
Yeah.
people will get the bounce back and they'll be aware that they will not get a response. Therefore, if it does need to be escalated because it's more urgent than an email, then as you say, they'll pick up the phone. So it's just keeping people in the loop. I think probably the worst thing we can all do is just not say, right, I'm only going to check my emails once a day, but not tell anyone. I think that can lead to maybe frustration. So it's just about keeping people informed, isn't it? And the other thing, just we've covered this on podcasts before, but it's pretty well proven now, isn't it, that humans are rubbish at multitasking. We just can't do it. We can only focus on one thing at a time. So batch processing is the most efficient and effective way to operate. So if you're doing your emails 2 or 3 times a day, it's a much more efficient and effective way to deal with them than it is to keep dotting in and out and deleting the latest buy a rug with your business logo on or whatever it is that comes up into your inbox. I seem to get a lot of those. I'm not
Is
sure
that what
why.
you get?
Yeah. Logomats.co.uk. I'm not sure that's what it's called, but yeah, we could have like a Larkin Gowan logo doormat to wipe our feet on and everything. It's just amazing the emails I get.
Great. But no, realistically, I think it's a really good habit to get into. And I think as well, like you say, it's about communication, isn't it? So if you're someone that has always been on their emails continuously, you do need to let senders know that you're not going to be doing that going forwards, perhaps, because they have an expectation based on what they know. We tend to, I know which of my fellow partners are always on their emails and ones which do exactly that they deal with them in batches. So if I need something more, something's more pressing, I wouldn't call it urgent as necessarily, but something's more pressing, then I'd pick the phone up to them. So yeah, it's about setting expectations as much as anything. But as ever, try it, see if it works for you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing you mentioned at the start there, Becky, was it's not just emails, it's socials, it's social media, social platforms as well, isn't it? And I mean, I think it's pretty well documented now that there's some underhand tactics used by some of the tech giants out there to keep you glued to the screen, because obviously the more time you spend on there, the more likely you're going to click on adverts, etc., and make them more money. So that's pretty well documented now. It's funny, I was talking to a client the other day and we were talking about this kind of stuff about the addiction around social media and the dopamine hits, just hoping you put a post up and has someone liked it and all this kind of stuff. And he was telling me that it was midnight, 12 o'clock, and he's thinking, right, I need to go to bed now, but I'll just check Facebook before I go to bed. And he said next thing he knows, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. He's wasted an hour of his life, and more importantly, an hour of his valuable sleep time by just scrolling through Facebook. And he said, I got nothing out of it. I felt rubbish when I went to bed. I couldn't sleep when I first went back to bed at 1 o'clock. And then next thing you know, he's got to be up. He's got 2 young kids, and and the cycle starts again. And you think, how many people get caught in that trap? So as you say, it's not just emails, it's social media. It's how does that interaction with tech knock on to the rest of your following day, even not just the day you're in.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we see it in our teams, don't we? Particularly, I mean, this is a massive generalization, but the younger team members who just can't be away from their phone at all. I mean, I'm pretty bad, but certainly not one of the younger ones anymore. But, they're just constantly distracted by notifications pinging up of Instagram or whatever it is.
So yeah, I think there was a lot came out on that point there around emails and socials, but it is just very much around being mindful of the use, isn't it? It's how do we... I think it's like all this stuff is there's no good or bad in the world. It just depends on the angle you look at it and how you use things. There's no doubt about it. Social media and emails have got a lot of good things about them if they're used in an appropriate way. And it's just how can we use them in a slightly more appropriate way to get the benefit out of them as leaders? How do they work for us, not against us?
Exactly. Making it work for you, isn't it? So you get the benefits. So yeah, that's a really good one.
Excellent. Like that one, Becky. So the one I'm going to take is going to be number 8. I feel like a bingo corner. I don't know what 8 is in bingo. So I'm going to go for number 8, and number 8 is they avoid meetings at all cost. And at first, at first face value on this one, you think, what? I have loads of important meetings. But I think, Kevin is saying on this one, and I think this resonates with all of us. How many meetings have we been in where we just sit there and think, I'd rather be doing anything, maybe even poking my eye out with a pen here, it'd be less painful than this meeting I'm in. And it's just not productive. There's nothing coming out of it. Maybe we've just got this standard agenda, which we do day in, day out, week in, week out. No one's got anything to say. And you just end up talking for the sake of it because it's just a meeting. And like just having a purpose for the meeting. So one of the things Kevin says is get everyone to stand up. If it's an important meeting, then if people have got to stand up, they're not just going to kind of just run on for this. That's a bit Norfolk, isn't it? They won't just run on, boy.
Run on.
If you get people to stand up, then they're more likely to be focused on the meetings. They don't want to stand there for hours on end just for the sake of it. So I think it comes back to purpose, doesn't it? Why purpose and why? Why are we having this meeting? What do we want to get out of it? Is there a business reason to have this meeting? And I think sometimes we just lose track of that, and they just get diarised, and they just happen, don't they?
Yeah, I think we're all very prone to accepting a meeting because we've been invited. We're like, oh, I must be important. Like you say, I've been invited to a meeting, I must attend. I can't possibly miss out. And we do need to sort of check ourselves really and understand what's the purpose of the meeting. What am I going to get out of it? What is the agenda? What are the outcomes intended to be? And really value our time. It comes back to, doesn't it? And just making sure that it is for a good purpose. And I mean, I take your point about you've been in meetings where you'd rather poke your eyes out, but actually sometimes the meeting is enjoyable, but still doesn't actually achieve anything. Yeah. And that's just as much of a waste of time, really, isn't it? Because if there is something that needs to be progressed and you've just had a chat or a pity party or, a general grumble about stuff, that's not an effective use of time either. And the whole point of this is how we can best use our time and be more productive. So you absolutely need to know going into it before you even accept what's the purpose, do I need to be there, and what outcome are we anticipating from this?
Yeah, a couple of interesting points around meetings. Years ago, I read the autobiography of Rudolph Giuliani, who was mayor of New York at the time. Obviously, some could argue things went a bit downhill for him thereafter, but we're not going to get into that kind of political debate. But it was one of the best books I've ever read in terms of how he ran effectively the council. In the UK, we'd call it a council. He had a daily meeting with his inner circle team, but it was literally like a 10-minute meeting. And they used to just meet at 8, I think it was 8 o'clock every morning, 10 minutes, bang, what's critical. Coming back to last week's episode, most important task of the day, almost as a team, what is our most important task? What have we got to deliver today? Bang, right, come on, let's go and do it. And I thought, I really get that. And I learned from that as well, because one of the things I think, Becky, years ago when we were both on the executive committee team running a part of Larkin Gowan business, we had a very fluid management structure at the top. We had maybe a monthly meeting where we'd all get together, but most decision making was taken in real time, and it was fluid, and it wasn't we had to all sit down for half an hour and scratch our heads and debate it. That if that was needed, it was needed. But most of the time we could just go, right, what's the decision here? There was 5 of us on the committee, one person, one vote, demographic, bang, off we go. Democratic rather than demographic, graphic. Democratic. I can see. I said it now. But that was quite fluid, wasn't it? And it worked really well. And we didn't get bogged down. It was fast paced, And if something needed to be considered, it would take to the monthly meeting if it needed a bit more consideration. And and during lockdown as well, when we first went into lockdown, myself and Barry Howell, who was a senior manager in my team, we adopted the Rudolph Giuliani approach. We had an 8 o'clock meeting every morning, almost like a war committee. We had a 10-minute, 15-minute meeting every morning at 8 o'clock. What's going on? What's changed in the world? Are the team okay? What do we need to do? So when things settle down in the world again, we abandoned those daily meetings. But it's just what's appropriate. Is there, as you said, is there a purpose? Is there a value? How do we keep the decision making quick, snappy, keep things going in a forward direction? But if we need to have a forum to consider things in a bit more depth, what is that forum as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the worst thing is when you set up a recurring meeting and it just is just, it just continues forever, doesn't it? And like you say, you need to make a decision of actually, do we still need these meetings in the diary, or have things moved on, and should we change it? Do we need it at all? So it is, constantly challenging ourselves on using our time the most effective way. And meetings can be such a drain, can't they? Especially, if you look at your diary and they're back to back, it's not a great feeling. It's not going to make you productive either. And it's not going to bring much joy to your day, which, we all need to find that as well. So, I think definitely question when you're invited to a meeting, or indeed if you're setting up a meeting, who needs to be there, who are the, the critical people that do need to be there, and what are you actually hoping to achieve?
Yeah, great. And I think that one alone could probably, if we were all really honest with ourselves and looked in the mirror and we went through our diaries, we could buy back a lot of time there, I suspect.
Yeah.
Not necessarily by cancelling or not having the meetings, but maybe even just changing the format of certain meetings.
Yeah.
But
or setting them to be a shorter time as well.
Yeah.
Because often we put an hour in automatically and it doesn't need to be an hour.
Yeah.
And it also goes back to last week's chat where one of our tips was say no. So just because you're invited to a meeting doesn't mean that you have to say yes.
Yeah.
Ask the questions and then make a decision.
Definitely. And again, I hear some people screaming at their iPhones as we're talking here, saying, yeah, but it's a good social interaction. It's good to get the team together because we get to communicate and, have some rapport building and, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a fair challenge. But also, I think it's also challenging ourselves to think, is that the most appropriate place to have that kind of interaction with the team? Should we be going for a bite to eat at lunchtime instead? Should there be another? I'm not saying we don't use meetings for it, but is it appropriate, and will we get more value if we did it in another environment as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's lots of reasons to just think before accepting or sending a meeting. It doesn't mean we're saying no meetings. We just make sure that they are effective, productive, and not just a drain on everyone's time.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so third tip for today, Becky.
So the third one that I've got for you is number 13, which is touch things only once. And this links back nicely actually to the emails as well, where you were saying, if you process them in batches, if you just touch it once and actually deal with it there and then, rather than open it, read it, think, I'll come back to it. If it can be done quickly, just get it done, get it off the list. And that one is one that I absolutely have adopted and have found so much. I have to remind myself sometimes, especially first thing in the morning, when you just opened your inbox. But once you get into the habit, it's really, really effective, and helps to, like say, clear that volume of emails probably, but whatever task it is, not just emails, rather than picking it up and putting it down. Just get it done. It maintains your focus, maintains your flow, and avoids you being pulled from every direction. Just get things off the list.
Yeah. And years and years ago, I mean, you probably remember this as well, Becky, because you're same era as me, shall we say? Same vintage. Let's be more kind. The same vintage. There was a guy who came to Larkingown. He presented to the firm. We used to have a firm-wide conference once a year. A guy called Chris Fredrickson. Do you remember Chris Fredrickson?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And larger than life American guy who was sort of a business guru. And he didn't talk about accountancy. He talked about kind of how to be more effective as a business person effectively, didn't he? And I always remember one of the things he talked about was effectively this: just touch it once. And that was back in the day when we used paper rather than electronic, and paper shuffling was a big problem. He said people would spend half their day moving the pile of paper from one side of the desk all the way back over to the other again, and then back again. And you'd think, wow, I've had a really productive day. I've moved this pile of paper about 46 times today. I feel so pleased with myself. It's been a good old productive day. And he said, every time you pick up a piece of paper, he said, every time you pick up a piece of paper, rip a big corner off it. And the next time you touch it, rip another corner off it and keep going. And he said, that will tell you how important that piece of paper is. And I thought, that's really fair, isn't it?
It is true.
Obviously, in today's electronic age, it's a bit different, but the sentiment is still there, isn't it? If you keep touching something like that, then it's probably not that important.
No.
And then that also reminds me of there's another model which I introduced to the team off the back of this one, which is called RAFT, RAFT. and it stands for the first R is for refer. So first of all, do I need to do it, or should this be referred to another member of the team? So delegation, up and down. Should we refer it? The A is act. So should I, as you said, should we just deal with it now? And they very much talk about there's two elements to act. If it's going to take less than say 5 minutes, you just crack on and do it. If it's more, then you come on to the F, which is file, which means you kind of file it away to do later. So then coming back to one of the tips from last week, don't have a to-do list, use your calendar to diarise your work, file it and put an appointment in to deal with it at a later date. And the final one is toss. If it's just useless, just throw it away, just toss it away, get rid of it. Yep. So Raft is a good model to maybe follow as well. If you need a little bit more discipline around this area, just keep thinking Raft, refer, act, file, toss. Let's just kind of forgot it myself then. Yeah. Terrible. So that's another one we can use around touch it once as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the number of people that I see that have an inbox that's overflowing and they've read all these emails and then they might go back and mark them as unread because they want to deal with it later or color code them or something. And it's, it just must be take up so much of their time, but also fill their head because there's all this stuff that they know is still sitting there. Whereas if you get it done, touch it once, it's gone.
Becky, it probably comes back a bit to the point last week around to-do lists, doesn't it? If you've got an inbox full of emails, it's a bit like having a long to-do list. It's actually going to create more stress because you're never going to cross everything off it, and it's a bit like that, isn't it? So having a system of how you deal with your emails as well, from touching it once point of view, is probably going to bring your stress loads right down. Because as you say, people let them build up and then it becomes one of those ones which is, I'm not going to look. If I don't look, then it's not a problem, but it's just sitting there at the back of the mind and it just worries people as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I know certainly for me, if I feel like my inbox is getting a little bit out of control, I need to get through it. I need to clear it. And then mentally I feel better about it. So having a system that works for you, only checking 3 times a day, touching things only once, both those things together, really helped me to manage that volume of traffic that otherwise can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, I did read a story once about a CEO who, when he went on holiday, he basically used to just say, my email's not going to be checked and they're all going to be deleted. So he would come back from holiday with no emails in his inbox, because his view was, if it's urgent, then it's going to be passed to somebody else and it will be dealt with. I don't need to sift back through old emails, So no. I'm not saying here, everyone with, just go out there and just hit the delete button and delete all your emails down. But I bet if you did, if it was important, someone would email you again the next day saying, hey, what's going on? You haven't responded to my email. And there'd probably be just a few of them, probably for most people, So if you feel completely overwhelmed, then perhaps do it. Let's just, if you've got 200 emails in your inbox, just delete them all and see what happens, just go for it. Then only the important ones will come back.
Really?
It's worth a go.
That might be a bit radical. I think there's other things we can try first. But some of these habits, though, can really, really help both mentally and, like we're saying, with time. But for me, it is the mental aspect more than anything, to be able to feel like it's under control, it's all manageable, and it's not overwhelming, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, so Becky, I think we covered 3 really good points that Kevin raised again there. And as with last week, we'll put them in the show notes. So just to remind people what we covered today, tip number 7 was only check your emails 3 times a day and social networks as well. Tip number 8 was next, which is avoid meetings at all costs. And we're saying just make it appropriate, have a purpose, have a reason, make it appropriate. That seems to be what is coming out from that tip. And the final one today was tip number 13, which is they touch things only once. Let's not paper shuffle, to use an old term on it. Let's not move it from one side of the desk to the other. Let's just deal with it. And we brought in the Raft model, the refer, act, file, toss. Just think about how you can not keep touching things and kind of never dealing with stuff and getting into that kind of perpetual, oh my God, how do I deal with all this? So that brings us to the end of today's show, Becky. I think there's got to be a part 3 to this, because there are 15, and I don't think we should ring it out too far and do all of them, but I do think there's another 3 which would add a lot of value. So there's definitely going to be a part 3 to this one. There you go, a little bit of continental speak there for the listeners as well. So if you enjoyed today's show, we've already mentioned that all of the links will be in the show notes. If you really enjoyed today's show, then please rate and review us. 5-star rating really helps other people find us. That would be fantastic. Finally, massive thank you to our sponsors, Larkin Gowan. Without Larkin Gowan, this show would not be possible. Follow the link in the show notes to see how their team of experts can help you and your business. And finally, Becky, that just leaves us to say to all of the listeners, have a great week, be kind to yourself, and boost your health, wealth, and self.